Hello and welcome into Locked On Wolves on the POSTCAST. We are live following a tumultuous Timberwolves win over the LA Lakers. I'm with Tyler Metcalf of Canis Supis. We're going to break the whole thing down next. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of the Locked On Wolves podcast, and I'm here with Tyler Metcalf from Canis Supis. We're going to break down Wolves Lakers. This is the live postcast immediately following the Wolves win over the Lakers on Saturday night. And Tyler, this was a weird game, to say the least. It had a little bit of everything at various moments throughout. I felt like this was a well-played game from two Western Conference contenders, teams that are going to be at least in the second round, if not the conference finals. And then in other moments, it was like devolved and was really sloppy. And there were tons of reviews and technical fouls and flagrants and it was just kind of messy. There's a ton of places we could start. I guess off the top here, what are your initial takeaways, initial off the top thoughts from this one?
I know the game was a one bucket game, but it kind of felt like the Wolves almost played a perfect game, at least when you look at the numbers where, the Lakers had a 46.6 effective field goal rate. That is awful. Their offensive rating was 108. Free throw rates are about the same. So yeah, there's some issues with the refs and whatnot, but both teams were attacking the rim. There was a lot of physicality going on. Wolves got their fair share of calls, but then you look at the turnovers and yet again, we've been talking. I sound like a broken record on this for the past however many weeks now, but turnover rate for the Lakers was just 10.3. Minnesota, 18.8. 9 more turnovers than the Lakers. They got 19 points off of turnovers. That allows them to get out in transition, get a bunch of easy buckets. We saw how awful their offense looks in the half court and how easily the Wolves were able to deal with them. But Anthony Davis was huge in the first quarter. Their transition offense and those turnovers kind of kept them afloat late. And then the game just ended up being a little closer than it really needed to be.
Yeah, you mentioned, I guess let's start with the beginning of the game real quick. And we'll obviously spend time on the end of the game, but the turnover battle and the, even really a battle. The Wolves turned it over 9 more times than the Lakers. The turnover category, I guess, and then the start for Anthony Davis are what put the Wolves kind of behind the 8 ball. And we're used to this Wolves team starting slowly in games. And we've seen, first half, they're roughly league average, I believe, net rating wise. In third quarter, they're second best in the league. I think fourth quarter, they're third or fourth best. So it has been slow starts. But in this game, it was, as you mentioned, really sloppy with the ball. And then also Anthony Davis kind of having his way with the Wolves defense. The Lakers had a huge advantage in terms of paint points early in the game. The Wolves caught up as the game went on because of Ant and then also Rudy. But early in the game, it was again sloppiness. It was turnovers. It was kind of carrying that theme forward from the OKC game on Tuesday and the Dallas game on Thursday. And that was what really, the Lakers had an 11-point lead. And it was largely due, you mentioned the Wolves playing a nearly perfect game, and it's true. Like, if you look, and I talked about this after the Mavericks game on Thursday, like the Wolves shot 45% from 3 on Thursday, 51% from the field, got to the line a bunch. Same thing in this game, 50% from the field, about 35% from 3, but they got to the line 24 times. So if you take half of those possessions where they turned it over and you say they, score a point per possession on those turnovers or something reasonable like that, like this turns into a multiple possession win for Minnesota. I know it's not that easy, but that's one way to look at it. And that's, some of these are just, they're simply throwing the ball away. Like, they aren't competitive turnovers in a lot of cases, and that's what kills Chris Finch.
Yeah, and just to kind of touch on Anthony Davis real quick, I think he had 17 in the first quarter. Yep. And it was like 8 of 9, all of that at the rim. But then you just look at the overall kind of shooting accuracy for the Lakers by the end of the game. They only shot 52.9% at the rim compared to the Timberwolves, who are at 76.9%. That's an absurd differential. And, mid-range, Lakers were at 40%. Timberwolves were at 37.5% from 3-point range. Lakers were at 30.4%. Timberwolves were at 35.3%. None of these metrics suggest that this game should have been anywhere as close as it should have. But then we go back to the turnovers, and they're not. Yes, the Lakers play really good defense. They have a lot of good defenders. They have a ton of size that really disrupt what their opponents are allowed to do. And we kind of saw that from the start with Vanderbilt on Conley, and that just kind of limited how quickly and effectively the Timberwolves were able to get into their offense. But it's these lazy outlet passes where we saw Rudy strip Anthony Davis in the post and then just kind of throw it ahead without even looking at who's there. And LeBron just effortlessly walks in front of it. And I think he gets a layup off of it. It's that kind of stuff where it happens 4 or 5 times a game. And it's just gifting the other team points when they've already done the work to end the possession. They've done the hard stuff, and then they're just failing to execute on the easy stuff that they should be rewarding themselves on.
That's the exact thing we're working with our 10U basketball team on. I was watching the game with my son, and he literally said, he goes, after that turnover, he goes, "Is that what you're talking about when you talk about the bigs, the 4s, and the 5s having to look for a guard after rebound?" I said, "Yeah, exactly that. That's exactly what we're trying to teach you guys right now." And that's the problem. One of the weird problems that the Wolves are having right now. All right. So we talked about the start to the game. The Wolves were down, down 11 at one point in the first quarter, and things really could have spiraled, but the bench played really well for Minnesota, especially early in this game. It was obviously a huge Naz Reid game. We really can't go any further without talking about him. But in that first stint, Nickeil Alexander-Walker was awesome. He had a 3 at a key point in the game when the Wolves were down by a few possessions. Strong defense early. I thought he had a tough whistle in this game on the defensive end of the floor. Pretty much the bench for the Wolves outplaying the Lakers bench, and really a fully stocked Lakers team, at least to start the game. Obviously, D'Lo, Austin Reeves, both coming off the bench. Anthony Davis and LeBron both playing. Like, this was a full-strength Lakers team, and the Wolves, their depth really showed out early in this one, and it was the Wolves bench outperforming the Lakers bench that allowed Minnesota to not just hang around, but also, take a lead at some point in the second quarter.
Yeah, and the second quarter got off to a real ugly start offensively, at least, where I think the first handful of possessions were air ball, turnover, missed 3, missed layup, and then a turnover, which was an offensive foul. And then they, just took a deep breath and kind of started to figure their stuff out. But like you said, Naz Reid stepping up in a big way again, and it's big theme this year where every time the Cat has struggled or gotten in foul trouble or been hurt, Naz is stepping up every single time. So I know that one of the big talking points with this team going forward is the cap sheet and paying 3 centers all of this money, and that, one of Cat or Naz is going to have to get moved eventually. And maybe that comes to fruition. But right now, Naz is so essential to this team because these are the types of games where he can step up. And if they don't have Naz Reid on this team, they lose this game tonight, where he finished with 21 points tonight, 5 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 steals, 2 blocks, 3 or 4 from the line, 2 of 5 from 3, 8 of 11 from the floor. That's incredibly efficient scoring, and he was doing it at the rim and from 3. Something I thought was really fascinating was how aggressively the Lakers were kind of protecting the rim and having their weak side defenders just basically in the lane to take away any lobs to Gobert or deter drives, and just kind of leaving guys wide open in the corner. That works with Kyle Anderson. That doesn't work with Naz Reid. And he showed them real quickly that he's going to punish them if they don't close out on him. But then he also showed them that he's more than capable of attacking those closeouts and finishing at the rim with either hand. So that decisive decision-making, just split-second release, driving, attacking, the ball never sticks with him. Absolutely crucial to tonight's win.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how Chris Finch manages those backup big minutes moving forward. We've seen, Troy Brown Jr. get a little bit of run, mostly at the 3, I think, lately here, but kind of as that 9th guy. But with Slow-Mo's shooting issues that are well documented, which is, by the way, crazy, because even though everybody knows he shot 41% last year, but it was strictly from the corners. But that's literally all they need him to do. If he could only shoot, 1.5 threes a game, because last year the threat of him making that 3 at a league average clip from the corners was enough to be effective enough to leave him on the floor. And now Chris Finch has to kind of, push and pull, like what's the right mix here of who's on the floor, what's my mix of bigs depending on the opponent, how they're defending. But you're right. I mean, the Naz can both shoot the ball better than Kyle Anderson, obviously, and also attack off the dribble with more explosion and is far more dangerous. Yes, Slow-Mo's a better passer, and he's on the floor primarily to play make anyway when he's out there. But it is really interesting to see. And Dallas found out the hard way a couple of times already with Naz Reid, with, leaving him. And I think we saw them change it a little bit the last time they faced the Wolves. Instead of just like daring Naz to beat them, it was like, okay, we actually have to factor this guy into our defensive game plan. And, 21 points and 11 shots off the bench is a fantastic night for Naz Reid. We talked about Davis already in the first quarter and the defense not being great. In the third quarter, things were really it was kind of stop and start. A lot of reviews. Game was close. And then we get into the fourth quarter, and we will talk about the final minute, or I guess final couple of minutes. But Anthony Edwards kind of had this burst in there that it seemed like the Wolves were going to get separation, and I guess they did. I mean, they were up a couple of possessions with a couple of minutes to play, but Anthony Edwards had this it was almost like what was it, like first quarter, third quarter of the Mavs game when he was unstoppable, and then he had a couple of moments where it was maybe less great for Ant. It was kind of the same thing in this game where all of a sudden he just went nuts and he hit that crazy crossover shot from the right side of the floor where he got Anthony Davis on the step back from like 18 feet or something.
Yeah.
And then he came down, hit the three, had a big layup mixed in there too in transition. Just gave this absolute burst on a night when nobody else other than Naz really brought it offensively. In fact, Ant attempted 23 shots in this game. Nobody else on the Wolves shot the ball more than 11 times. Ant had 31 on 23 shots. And only had 3 assists and 3 turnovers in this game. This was just another high-volume Ant game. But I thought at that point in the game, with nobody else coming to the party offensively except for Naz, and with the way the Lakers were trying to defend the paint and trying to load up on Ant, for the most part, I thought made some good decisions. There were a couple of possessions where you'd like to see him kick it to a shooter, but for the most part, I thought he attacked when he needed to and did what he needed to do to get the Wolves the win in this one.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. I think in the kind of second and third quarter, the ball started sticking with him a little more, where he would go ISO heavy and just kind of over dribble for 10, 15 seconds at a time. And then once he didn't see anything he liked, then he would kick it out. And it's like, okay, that's not how you really run a free flowing offense. But when you have an isolation scorer like him, who is now consistently getting to 30 with ease in a whole bunch of different ways in all 3 levels of the court, you kind of live with it, especially when, as we were seeing game by game now, his decision-making in these final 5 minutes or so has been really good, where he is moving the ball a little more. He is reading the weak side on his drives, where if the entire defense collapses, he's more than happy to kick out to Mike Conley in the corner. And we saw that again tonight. So there were a couple kind of hero ball moments that he could have tried to capitalize on a little more, but the unselfishness, I think, is still there enough late in games where you can live with some of the kind of stickiness in the second and third quarters. Again, I think the big thing with him, you mentioned 31 points, 23 shots on the face, really efficient, but then, only 43.5% from the floor overall. That's rough. That's where we go back to the free throw column. 11 free throw attempts. He had 18 against Dallas. I think 13 the night before, or the game before that against the Thunder. This is a really awesome trend that hopefully continues, where he's getting a little more respect. It feels like the Hays are a little less aggressive coming from him, and a little more measured and picking his spots a little better with those. But that aggressiveness, the explosiveness, the reputation that he's starting to build and getting to the line, if he can maintain that 7-ish, if not more, a game, that's going to be absolutely huge for his scoring and just the overall offense of the team.
Let's talk about our title sponsors over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player projections and watch your winnings roll in. Basketball season is, about a third of the way over. Last couple weeks of NFL football as well. And you can still play the Specials League, which is a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you could have taken LeBron James tonight. You could have gone over to the football game, the Saturday night game, and picked a 10.5 combo, 3-pointers made plus receptions taken more than or less than, and watch your winnings roll in there. They also have a reboot policy, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball, you have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't return in the second. You can reboot that player. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform that has an injury insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, it's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, let's talk a little bit about the end of the game. Excuse me. So at the end of the game, the Timberwolves were up by 7, and the Lakers, I mean, like, I'm skipping ahead. There was a crazy back and forth. I don't want to go blow by blow because
Yeah.
you're watching this, listening to this. You probably watched the game. You don't need us to rehash it all. But there was the crazy back and forth, 3-pointers getting traded, and now it's a 7-point game, and LeBron hits a tough shot, gets fouled by Jaden McDaniels, and it was, letter of the law, technically a foul, whatever. It was close. It was Jaden McDaniels' 6th foul. The more important that was piece one was that actually there's like 3 things you can't do, right? You can't allow a 3-point play. You can't foul when they're making a shot. You can't allow a 4-point play, which means don't foul in a 3-pointer or don't get a technical foul. McDaniels did all the things you can't do. He fouled him, allowed him to make the shot, and got a technical foul. It ends up being a 4-point possession for the Lakers. The Wolves come down, don't score on their end, have a bit of a disjointed possession themselves. And then in transition, the Wolves got, it looked like they were going to get an offensive rebound. And for whatever reason, a couple guys on the perimeter, including Conley, kind of lingered instead of just getting back when you're up 3. Conley got back in time to kind of do a flyby contest on LeBron. LeBron shoots the 3. They rule it a 2 on the floor, review it. Seemed inconclusive. It was one of those where when he starts the shot, the toe's behind the line, but as he tips forward to jump, it looks like it touches the line. Classic like NFL review. They stick with the call on the floor. That's pretty much what happened there. And it's ruled a 2-point shot. And of course, then there's still, we could talk the last position too. Ant misses a free throw. So the Lakers actually still had another shot to tie it or take the lead. But I don't know, thoughts on that final, like, I feel like we got to talk about it. I don't really know what my take is there other than it was just kind of crazy, like a really weird last 30 seconds. And obviously the immaturity, the continued maturity issues, I guess, of Jaden McDaniels.
Yeah, and I thought it was a tough call. It felt like Jaden was trying to be so intentional about showing my hands are up, they're out, I'm not swiping down, I'm not fouling, I'm not doing this. And then, LeBron initiates the contact and goes into him and he gets the call. Shout out Tony Brothers. He was feeling himself tonight. He was on one. But when you're Jaden, I get the frustration because so many of his fouls tonight were kind of like that. And he had there was a lot of ticky-tack stuff, especially with LeBron, where it's like, is that really a foul? Is that really a foul? And then, you go to the bench and you're looking at the stats and all of that, and you see that the Lakers have 15 fouls on them compared to 26 on you. And a lot of that is based on how the Lakers defend and attack the rim. So I'm not saying it's all conspiracy theory or anything like that, but it's frustrating as a player. And when you're a guy like Jaden, who has to take on the toughest defensive assignment every single night, and you constantly get calls like that, that then allow the opponent back in the game, it's really frustrating. What he has to do there is just put his head down. He's not changing the call and get the heck to the bench, because that was a rare, and it didn't even seem like there's that much of an emotional outburst. So he must have said something not family friendly there, because we never see that from Jaden. We rarely see Jaden get teed up, and when he does, he is really pissed. So it's just something you can't do. I know that's not enlightening or way out there or revolutionary, but you just can't do it, especially in that spot.
Yeah, and obviously, like McDaniels, you mentioned the foul issues he's had, and for the most part, I thought, he had been improving over the last couple of years, marginally in terms of the overall issues of fouling. But it is interesting because he is clearly has a reputation now as a good defender. And a lot of times guys that are really good defenders will tend to get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, just like stars get calls on the offensive side of the ball. But we're not seeing that really from McDaniels yet. And maybe that follows at some point, if the Wolves continue to, it seems silly, but if they continue to be number 1 in the West and they continue to beat good teams, then maybe he gets a little bit more respect. But obviously, reacting apparently the way that he did probably isn't going to help. So anyway, all right, let's talk a little bit about Karl-Anthony Towns. I have a couple of things I'm going to ask your thoughts on. So Cat, obviously another rough game. This is game 3 coming back from the knee issue. He missed just the one game against Sacramento. He had 9 points, 9 rebounds in this game. He had 5 turnovers, 5 personal fouls. And I generally don't like to cite individual player single game plus minus.
Same.
This is a 2-point game, and he was at minus 23. That's notable, right? So it's so hard to know, like, how injured is he? How much of this is? I mean, he only missed one game, so it's not rust. How much of it is he's not all the way right. But it's not just that. I mean, if for people that have watched Cat for his entire career or even just the last couple of seasons, know Cat when he has the stray voltage version of Cat. And that's what this feels like, where he's flailing his arms dramatically after not getting a call, falling down a little bit more often, reacting demonstrably. He had done a good job last year, before and after the injury, I think doing a little bit better with that. He had moments early this season where it was an issue, but was so mature the last several weeks. And now it feels like it's back. And to me, it seems like he's not quite right. And maybe this is just, he's compensating and he's looking for calls to try and get himself right. I don't know. I mean, because from a decision-making standpoint, other than the silly offensive fouls that have cropped back up, I don't know that he's making the wrong decisions. He made a couple of nice passes tonight. He did it on Thursday against Dallas. Defensively, he maybe is a little slow rotationally, but what are you seeing from Cat overall here the past 3 games? And I guess more specifically tonight?
Yeah, and it kind of looks like what we saw from him the first handful of games to start the season, where he kind of came out sluggish. It was like, oh God, this fit just looks clunky again. This doesn't look like it's going to work. And then after 5 or so games, he was playing like an all NBA level, where he was 50, 40, 90, playing the best defense of his career, and was really good for a couple months. So my hope is that this is just him still kind of recovering from that injury. Maybe he's not fully 100%. Maybe that time that short time off was, and compiled with the holiday season, maybe, I don't know. It's just kind of like putting him in a bit of a funk that hopefully he breaks out of here sooner rather than later. But it really feels like what we saw from the start of the season. And he was playing so well before that little injury that kind of knocked him out for a game, that I kind of want to give him the benefit of the doubt tonight. But like you said, I mean, single game plus minus, it's far from perfect. But when you're a minus 23 and the next lowest person is a -8, it's notable. It's really notable. It's not a stat that you should live and die by, but when there's that much of an outlier, it's really, really glaring. So another night with 5 turnovers, he keeps doing the rip or the hook on the drives, and that just feels like a habit that he's never going to break out of, which is horribly frustrating, because the game plan and the book is out on him now, and every single ref is looking for it when he drives now. But he was doing that thing where he flails and falls to the ground and doesn't get back in transition again too, which gives the opponent 5-on-4 at minimum every single time down in transition. So when you do that a handful of times, you turn it over 5 times, you're 3 of 7 from the floor, you have 5 fouls, it just all compiles into another really rough showing. So he's better than this. He's shown that he's better than this for the previous 2 months, where he was playing some of the best basketball of his career. I'm willing to, give it another couple games before we, really start hitting the panic button. But it's a slump that he definitely needs to kind of work himself out of.
Let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel. As the weather continues to get colder, as we're officially now into winter, the NFL offers Stay Hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. Go check out what the line is for Wolves Knicks. That's a New Year's Day matinee at Madison Square Garden on Monday. I think it's on NBA TV as well. So go check out the line over there. Could also probably still get in on some Wolves, in-season action to win the division. Go check what that line's at. The app is extremely easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options that include spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to continue the last couple weeks of the NFL season, as well as the middle portion of the NBA season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. All right, a couple more for you here, Tyler. Let's talk a little bit about, this is, I guess rewinding towards the beginning of the game. Something that the Lakers did, getting a little bit more in the weeds here defensively, is they decided to hound the ball with Jared Vanderbilt. And that's something the Wolves obviously did some stuff. They played around with Vando, 2 years ago, just doing different things with him, blitzing pick and rolls, trying to be aggressive on ball handlers, trying to just use his aggression and also the fact that he's undersized, but also long and athletic. Like, just see what you can do with Vando. He's not like the point of attack defender that Jaden McDaniels is. He doesn't move quite as quickly laterally, but Conley is maybe the perfect guard that you could try and bother with Vando, because he's not probably going to beat you off the dribble like a quicker, younger guard might, but you also can try and speed up the Wolves offense and get the ball out of his hands and then try and make somebody else create. And that's clearly what Darvin Ham and the Lakers are trying to do. So they put Jared Vanderbilt on Conley to start the game. It seemed to throw the Wolves a little bit out of whack, and I thought it was partly how the Lakers built that double-digit lead. What was your take on that? And I guess also how the Wolves responded to that early in the game.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's something to keep an eye on going forward. And it definitely worked. I'm assuming how the Lakers hoped that it would, because when you have a guy as big and athletic and as energetic as Jared Vanderbilt picking you up full court every single possession after every single make, that's exhausting. And when you're Mike Conley's age, you don't want to deal with that every single possession. So, that's where the kind of creation abilities of a Kyle Anderson and Anthony Edwards and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, that's where they become so important, because they have to kind of be a little more aggressive about going and getting the ball from Mike and at least taking it across half court and then, running a little handoff action or something with him to then get into the offensive flow. But they were kind of slow to adjust to that, where there were a lot of times where an inbound would take 3 or 4 seconds to get in while someone finally realized that, oh, I have to go back and help because Jared Vanderbilt is playing ball denial, and we haven't seen that since college. So it's something that I think could probably cause some issues in the playoffs, where, scouting reports get so much more detailed and consistent and creative. I'm not sure we'll see it a ton on a regular basis throughout the regular season. Maybe with some teams like OKC or Denver, who have some really long and athletic point of attack defenders. But I think that's something definitely come playoff time, where the Wolves have to be a little more comfortable with a bunch of other guys kind of initiating the offense.
What are your thoughts on a comment here from Zach talking about how Chris Finch has been ticked off in his post game the last couple games, even though that the Wolves have won? So I guess going back to the turnover issues, I haven't seen the post-game comments yet from today, but clearly that was his focus. I think he said his quote was, "It's time to grow up offensively." He mentioned after the Mavs game on Thursday. Is this now like the Wolves are clearly a contender? They're a title contender at this point. I think it's pretty obvious. And now Chris Finch is this, are we going to see a different version of Chris Finch now? Like, how is this going to be all talk where he's just kind of like, hey, we need to get better, but nothing actually changes? Or are we going to see him be a little bit more hands-on, a little bit less player-driven, free-flowing offense? I shouldn't say that. I highly doubt the offense is changing, but maybe is there a little bit more structure? Are we going to see the Wolves follow through at any point? I guess I'm asking you to kind of predict what this looks like over the next few weeks. Obviously, the schedule's still really tough the next couple of weeks, but are we seeing this kind of turn from Chris Finch? Like, all right, we're there now. Like, now is the time. We can't afford to let this opportunity slip away by being so immature and making the mistakes we've been making. What's your take on this, I guess, new version, this new ticked off version of Chris Finch?
I love it. It sets expectations. It sets the culture. It's, yeah, we won. That's because we're really talented. We're a really good team, but we didn't play anywhere near our best game. And I think so much of that goes back to the turnovers and the decision-making that we continuously see from half of the roster right now. And it's just not good enough. It's good enough to scrape by in some of these wins in December, but it's not going to be good enough to hang on to the 1 seed. It's not going to be good enough to win multiple playoff series if habits don't change. And the fact that he's holding people accountable, I'm assuming based on his pressers, he feels like the coach, where if he's saying it publicly, he's preaching it privately too, and going over it in shoot-arounds and film and the huddles and all of that kind of stuff. So I think I don't think it's for show. I think it's the real deal. Some ways to combat some of those turnovers are kind of like you mentioned, a little more structure, but that was kind of the talk coming into the season, and we haven't seen a ton of that consistently. So I don't know how much goes into it. Maybe it's just limiting playing time sometimes and keeping shorter leashes, where if Cat starts throwing it all over the place and racks up 3 turnovers in a handful of minutes, he's getting an early sub. Maybe same thing with Anthony Edwards, where, couple turnovers here or there, a couple missed rotations on defense, and things start getting sloppy and lazy. You get subbed out a little earlier, and he's willing to kind of sacrifice some of those minutes here in the middle of the season to make sure that the message is sent and these guys are ready come playoff time.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, Towns was on the floor to at least to start the close of the game in crunch time there, despite having a really uneven game. Once again, it felt like it should have been a Nas closing game, but Towns was still on the floor. Did have a couple big rebounds in there, and I thought was okay in the final couple possessions. But yeah, I thought that'll be certainly something interesting to keep an eye on here moving forward, because for the most part, he's been kind of like, hey, our starters close the game like most coaches are. But anyway, any other final thoughts on this one, Tyler? Anything in your notes we didn't get to from Wolves Lakers?
Just it was a good win. It was a good win. It wasn't as, ugly, grinded out as some of the recent ones have been. Lakers are a really good team. They're a team that the Wolves could easily see in the playoffs, and it's going to be fascinating to see how they look after post trade deadline, because I have to imagine there's some big moves that they have to make, because there's zero shooting on this team. And when one of your, quote unquote shooters and D'Angelo Russell is a -19 in a game that you lose by 2, that's tough. So I expect some moves to be made. It'll be fascinating to see what they do with their roster come trade deadline. We saw the Knicks already make a big move. Maybe that's the first domino to fall here, but could be fun. They have very clear areas that they can improve on, that can really test the Timberwolves a little more. But currently, I really like how the Timberwolves match up with them.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Wolves Knicks on Monday. It's a matinee, 2 p.m. Central at the Knicks on NBA TV. That's New Year's Day. The tough stretch continues. Not a game against an unlikely playoff team for nearly 2 weeks still. So tough stretch continues. A big thank you for watching tonight live on YouTube on the postcast following Wolves Lakers. And if you're listening to the audio after the fact, a big thank you. Of course, you can always find the audio for these shows on the Locked On Wolves feed, and you can watch live on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel after each and every Wolves game. Of course, Locked On Wolves is back on Monday. We're with you every day, daily, every day, Monday through Friday. Your team every day over at Locked On Wolves. A big thank you again for watching. A big thank you for listening. And for Tyler Metcalf, have a good one.